Hi, YouTube. It's past my bedtime. But before I go to bed, I wanted to sit down in front of the camera and talk about something that has been rolling around in my head for quite some time now, which is uh, the question, what is a god? This is a big question. We're not going to answer the entire thing in the course of a short YouTube video. I've talked about this a lot in a variety of different ways. I have a whole playlist on YouTube that's dedicated to sort of questions around that constellation. But it's, I think it's a question that's worth asking. I think it's a question worth really drilling down on. And obviously people are going to have different answers to this question. I think paganism in particular is a religious community that really emphasizes a diverse range of theological perspectives and tries to accommodate those and make sure that different people in the same religious community can have radically different understandings of who and what gods are and how we interact with them, and have all of those perspectives afforded equal measures of respect and have them all be taken just as seriously. So you have, the whole gamut from like hard polytheists to soft polytheists. You have people who think that gods are literal spiritual entities. You have people who think that gods are aspects of the psyche or archetypes or personified forces of nature. And like all of these things are treated as legitimate in the pagan community. And that's a good thing. That's important. So what I want to talk about today is not a definitive, like, this is what gods are, because I don't fucking know what gods are, right? Like, I'm itty bitty bitty, and the gods are big, big, big. But I want to talk about my perspective. When I say such and such thing is a god, what do I mean? And my perspective on this is not universal. It's probably not even all that common. But when I think about gods, I think about them in the context of initiatory Wicca, which is the branch of paganism that I belong to. And initiatory Wicca is a mystery cult. So my connection with the two primary deities that I worship is in the context of ecstatic, direct mystical experience. And that defines and shapes my understanding of deity in general. I think of a god, any god, pick your favorite, as a mystery. And to me, the thing that makes a god different from any other spirit, the thing that makes a god different from like the spirit of my house or the spirit of the lake across the street or whatever, is that a god is a mystery, is a big experience, a transformative experience, cannot be put into words, and that changes you forever, and that you can only understand through that direct, ecstatic communion. So I sort of just gave a definition of mystery there, but let's drill down on that word, because that's another sort of vague word that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Roughly what I mean when I say a mystery with a capital M, mystery in the religious context, is an experience that changes you forever once you have had it, and that cannot properly be understood without undergoing it. So mysteries would include things like, birth, puberty, death, really like any of the 7 sacraments in Catholicism. If you come from a Catholic background, like those would all count as mysteries in my mind. But also just like, any kind of direct, overwhelming experience that you can't put into words, that you can't explain to someone who hasn't been through it, and that makes you fundamentally different than the person you were before. Now that's a really big definition of mystery, and I think in many ways it's a good one, but it's also too broad. It includes a lot of things that we don't really want to count as mysteries, particularly religious mysteries, right? Like, being in a car accident is an experience that you can't, like a serious car accident, is an experience that you can't really understand unless you've been through it, and having been through it, it potentially changes you forever. Do we want to say that car accidents are mysteries? Probably not. So my definition is flawed, but it's kind of the best working definition that I have. And that is how I understand gods. I understand gods as the names or the faces or the stories that we put to a mystery or a collection of mysteries, right? So oftentimes you'll have a god who presides over numerous domains, who is connected to numerous things. You know, a god might be a god associated with birth as well as death, as well as, you know, inspired poetry, as well as medicine or whatever. Like, and so that's not to say that each god has to be like, you know, you pick one experience and that's, you know, but these experiences sort of come together into a unified whole, into a thing that is its own, that is mysterious and powerful and overwhelming, and can only properly be understood through direct experience. And the name we give to that thing, the personality and stories we attach to it, is a god. So when people talk about Hephaestus, for example, Hephaestus, the forge god, the blacksmithing god, I think about the transformative experience of blacksmithing. I think about what it is to take metal and smelt it and heat it and beat it into shape, to twist it and cool it and heat it again, and the whole process that goes into taking raw ore and turning it into something shaped and artistic and strong. And there's something deep and powerful in that. I have on my bookshelf somewhere, way up at the top, you probably can't see it, I have a little like iron hook that I made myself. I went to a smithy and I forged a decorative iron hook. And I wasn't very good at it. I've never gone back. But it was a transformative experience. I was altered by that experience, admittedly in a fairly small way. But if I had spent more time with it, it probably would have become a very big thing. Right now, I'm also doing a lot of stuff with yeast. I'm currently obsessed with yeast. So I have a sourdough starter. I've been baking sourdough for the past couple of weeks, and loving that. Not just because I get good bread, but because there's something mysterious, you know, again, capital M, about like the way that we cut down grain and grind it and mill it into flour, and then the yeasts in it allow it to rise and form a new dough and create this new living thing that then gives us life and nourishment when we eat it. Like, it's so powerful. It's so deep and intense. I'm also making mead right now for the same reason, that I'm like this thing that is like the death and rebirth, the life cycle of yeast is very difficult to put into words, and I'm struggling to put it into words because there's a mystery to it. But those kinds of transformative religious experiences are the things that I think of as gods. And I think that each god is really, like, if you strip away, you know, the name that is just a word that people came up with in a particular language, and the stories that are, you know, myths that people invented and so on, like, there's something behind all of that that is primal and powerful and larger than us. And that is a mystery of some sort. And that's what I think of as a god. So if we talk about Aphrodite, right, I can tell you about like her girdle, which gives her certain magical powers. I can tell you about her love affair with Ares. I can tell you about her marriage to Hephaestus. I can tell you about the role that she played in the Trojan War. Like, I can tell you all of these things. But if you strip away all of that, if you strip away all of the sort of cultural and historical stuff and whatever, there is something behind all of it that is this experience, this mystery of the transformative power of love, of sex, you know, and of various other things that Aphrodite has been associated with. Like, there's a certain essence to her that exists beyond all of the trappings and decorations that we put up around her. That, to me, is what a god is. So I have a video that I did on the channel quite a while back. It's called, like, Do We Create the Gods? Where I talk about this sort of tension between the awareness that the names we give gods, the stories we tell about them, and so on, are often historically and culturally informed, versus the feeling that the gods are somehow larger than us, and that even if we hadn't come up with those names and those stories, there would still be something there worth worshiping. And that's what it is, right? Like, even if we had never come up with the name Aphrodite, even if we had never told the story of the Trojan War, love would always be a thing that was there that has this transformative effect that fundamentally alters the people who experience it. And it would always be worthy of worship because of that. And that thing behind the name, behind the stories, that's a mystery, and that to me is the real essence of who that god is. And you can only understand it experientially. Now, not all of these experiences are good or positive, right? Like, war is something that can never be understood unless you have experienced it directly, and that fundamentally changes you forever when you've been through it. It's not good. It's not a thing to be celebrated. But there's a mystery there. There is. And that's part of why we have war gods, and have had war gods for the entire history of human civilization. Now, I want to call out that this is, in many ways, an idiosyncratic way of thinking about the gods. Certainly, it's not the way that, like, well, for one thing, it's not the way that, like, a lot of the dominant Christian culture thinks about God, right? Their god is usually a very, like, direct personified figure. People, not just in Christianity, but in paganism as well, will sometimes talk about the gods as sort of being like superheroes, just being like, you know, exceptionally powerful personalities who are maybe like a little bit better than all of us, or in some cases a lot better than, but, you know, like, people will sometimes talk about the gods as just like really powerful people. That's a particular, like, that's a view that was very common in the ancient world as well. So if you look at historical evidence of, like, Old Norse religion, the gods were often just treated as people who happened to be more powerful than we are, and who happened to be, you know, capable of doing magic, and who lived in this other world and had all these adventures. But, like, fundamentally, they were kind of just people. The Homeric perspective on the gods, like, if you actually read the Iliad, the gods are not really treated as, like, a mystery. The gods are treated either as just people who are having petty squabbles, or really as psychological forces that are sort of made human. There's a really fascinating scene in the Iliad where Paris has been injured in a duel, and he's hiding away, recovering, and Helen has a conversation with Aphrodite, and Helen basically says, "This Paris guy sucks, I hate him, I don't want to go to him, I hate that I'm here, I regret all of my choices," and Aphrodite's like, "Well, too bad, you're in love with him, so you have to go to him." And just that, like, that's a very clear depiction of sort of the overpowering nature of erotic desire, and the way that love or attraction, or whatever you want to call it, being horny, can overwhelm your reason and can cause you to do things that you don't approve of. So there are certainly perspectives, not only in modern religion, but also attested perspectives in the ancient world, that treat the gods much more as just like basic personalities, you know, superhero characters, or as like psychological drives, personified forces of nature. And my perspective saying that, like, the gods are mysteries is not reflected by any of those perspectives. You may see it somewhat in, like, the actual ancient mystery cults, but it wasn't the widespread view, certainly for, like, state religion in a lot of the ancient world. So I'm not trying to say that my definition of, like, a god is a mystery. I'm not trying to say that that's the definitive definition. Ugh, what a terrible turn of phrase. I'm not trying to say it's the authoritative definition, or that everyone should think of the gods in this way, because there is not only room for a diversity of theological perspectives in paganism, but, like, it's important that there be that diversity of perspectives. But for me, coming into paganism from a mystery cult, having that be my primary interaction with deities, that's how I understand deities. And not just my deities, the deities that I worship in a Wiccan context, but also just any deity, if I'm trying to understand a deity, if I'm trying to sort of reach out to them and feel my way around them, the question I'm asking myself is, what is the mystery here? What is the transformative experience through which this God can be understood, and without which this God cannot be understood? Because that, to me, is more important than the names or the myths or even anything historically attested, really. If you can understand like the deep mystery behind a god, then the rest is confetti. Anyways, those are some thoughts. I'm going to go to bed. I'm tired. Have a good night, and I will talk to you all sometime soon. Bye.